Hello. So today I'm going to talk a little about a often maybe not used feature, maybe not known about, or something I just learned about with Nessus. So we are aware that Nessus has the ability for us to do compliance checks, right? So if we went and we tried to set up a new scan, right, we would minimize this so we can actually see it. If we went and set up a new scan and say we chose an advanced scan, or we chose a policy compliance auditing, we can set that up. So first, before we begin with Nessus, there's multiple ways that you can scan. There are things called plugins, and those will do the checks for you. Nessus is a very common used tool for vulnerability analysis. But there's also a thing called a compliance check. And what a compliance check is, you're given some kind of automation file that contains checks to identify what's going on inside of the system against a determined baseline. So if we go in here, we're using a Nessus Professional. I've set up a trial so that I can actually look at this. We'll have a number of options in here in order to choose which file. So we may use something that's already provided to us, say like a CIS, Amazon Web Service audit, or we can upload a custom file. Okay, so let's look at what our scenario is. So I'll go back to my scans. So our scenario is we have this Fedora VM, and I am going to go to Fedora's Cockpit. So commonly in Red Hat-based systems, and Fedora is a Red Hat-based systems, we have a web interface that allows us to interact with the system, and that's called Cockpit, and that gives us a lot of ability in terms of navigating around and doing different things. So let's go ahead and take a look here. So I am on Fedora's shell. So I'm going to go to my tools. Now I'll go to my terminal. And we can see that we're in temp. So let's say that you were told that there is a file that's in your environment and you needed to find that file and you needed to do it quickly. And you needed to do it in a repeatable way that also provides great output, like to an Excel file, so we can quickly figure that out. So in this case, we're looking for the file virus.txt. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, one of the things that we can do is we can actually use Nessus to set this up for us. So if we go into this one, I've set up file check. And all this is I have set up an advanced scan. And what you do is you make sure that you have at least one of these plugins selected. And the way that you do this is first, you disable all your plugins. So when you're setting up this scan, you can click this disable all plugins when you're setting up the scan. Then you go and you choose a file. So we'll filter for compliance. Unix, upload a custom Unix file. So we've already uploaded it. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So go ahead and remove that one. And we'll click this. So we have file check 3. Okay, so that file is actually what we currently have open in VS Code. Cool. So we've got some of this information. So how did we get this information? So as you're reading the documents for Nessus, as you should always read the docs for any tool that you're using, we see that there is a section about getting started with compliance checks. And in this case, there's Unix configuration. In this case, there's file check. So file check is a very specific setting that we can set inside of a nessus.audit file. When Nessus asks us to upload a custom file, it's expecting a .audit file. You can either download .audit files, right? So let's go ahead and open one of those just so you can get an idea. Here's a PCI compliance check for Red Hat. And you can see that it's got a bunch of different information here. So all of this may seem a little confusing. So let's just go ahead and look at what we've created. So very simply, we tell the system in an XML type format, right? So this is VS Code. I've turned on the XML language because a .audit file is an XML-like file. So our key value pairs, so we have an open tag and a close tag. Check type is Unix because that's what we've selected. We then set up a custom item because you can either create your own template or you can use an existing template. And so if you actually go into this PCI check here, you can see that each one of these, they do custom item, and then they also have set up some other information. And so you can do things like, you can do a condition, which is conditional logics like an or an if or an else, but it always starts with this check type. So we say check type underscore Unix, and then we say custom item. So the system that we're asking it to look at is Linux. The type of check that we want it to do is a file check. So we can set a description, and then we can ask it for a file. Okay, so we've uploaded that, we've set this up, we close our tags, we're good. So what does this actually look like in our scan report? So we will run our scan, and then we'll see compliance. And then if we look at it, the description and the output are actually what you have written in this file. So you say, make sure that temp has a file, and that's actually just for us. The output that you're seeing is based on the conditions that I set. So I wanted this to go green if it detected that virus.txt is present on the system. So if I ran this, this would take several minutes because it has to go through and run some of the other plugins that are set up, like it's going to do a basic check to see vulnerabilities and other things like that. And it's going to get some information detection because I didn't turn those things off. But in general, after it ran, it's going to find this. Some things to pay attention to. When you're setting up these kinds of custom scans for Linux systems, pay attention that you have the available tools in order for your plugins to work. Oftentimes, we are going to run our scans and we're going to expect everything is just going to work for us. One of the things that I was finding in my initial testing with this, and we can go back to our scans and we'll go to file check, we'll go to history, and you can see here that my initial scan, well, in one of these initial scans, it was failing for me. And it was failing because I didn't currently have strings installed because this is a brand new version of Fedora. So I had to install bin-utils in order to get that to work. So you have to pay attention in terms of what are the dependencies available for each one of your plugins when you're running Nessus. So the best way to find that is you can go here to Tenable plugins. You can search for the plugin that you're looking for. If we remember back in our configuration, there is a plugin that's being used for this one. We would have to search through and we can find it. So it's this Unix compliance check. We can see that the plugin number is 21157. So we would go look up 21157 in this at this URL. And we see it's Unix compliance check. So we need to read this very carefully. And we may see that at first run, it doesn't actually tell us a whole lot. So we can check our dependencies. So it's going to have no dependencies for any other plugins. And a common problem is you're not going to get enough information if you choose to selectively disable specific plugins and don't enable all plugins. That can happen. But as you go through here, you can read these different items and it may actually tell you specifically what it's expecting, right? So it may be especially expecting strings, which was the case here. So I had to go to my Fedora box in order to install that to get it to run. So that's a really good thing to use Nessus for, because it's a repeatable scenario that it creates a standard report that other security analysts can definitely use. Some things to think about. Nessus also has the ability to use Yara rules, right? So if we didn't want to mess around with the time of writing a specific .audit file, we can actually upload Yara rules to Nessus for specific plugins, right? And so this is a threat hunting with Yara and Nessus. And so Nessus has the ability for us to define things by Yara rules. We can simply upload those Yara rules. We have to make sure that we have selected the specific plugins to enable us to do this. And once we have these enabled, we can go ahead and configure them, provided that we have the right license. And this allows us to extend the capabilities of Nessus, in sense that if we have a security team, like we have some threat hunters or otherwise that have identified a malicious file, you can go ahead and get that set up on your system. There are some other things that we could definitely talk about with Nessus, but that's kind of all I really wanted to show today. And this is becoming more and more important as kind of what's happening in the world right now. Nessus has started putting together more and more templates to deal with, as they always do, emerging threat vulnerabilities. So like, for instance, they came out with the Log4j ecosystem vulnerability scan, and recently the CISA alerts to look for specific vulnerabilities on systems that are meeting these advisories. So using these templates, you can expand those capabilities to find more specific information or tune these if you have known mitigations in place that you have proven work, but you still want to verify that the detection is present if you find, say, a different vector or if it's different for your organization. I think that using something like being able to configure either these file system checks or using Yara rules can really help. If you're not used to writing Yara rules and you're just trying to do quick and dirty checks just to check whether or not a file is there, simply writing your audit file to look for the presence of a file or not is an easy way to accomplish that. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time.